Good morning. Has your morning actually been good? Okay, great. So since your morning is good, let's talk about building stuff. So things that, so this is just to kind of give a few different categories of ideas that I think are really worthwhile for people to start building and to start really concretely working on right now. And so in general, I think a lot of things have changed in the crypto space and in the Ethereum kind of development world in particular in the last 2 years. A lot of technologies that were really just thoughts and ideas and theories 2 years ago have slowly become very real over the last couple of years. And in a few places recently, I've talked about what some of those changes are, right? One is the fact that, we have rollups, we have scaling, things are getting cheaper again. So a lot of applications are just much more economically viable than they were 1 or 2 years ago. And so, when before, you might even say, well, maybe DeFi is the only thing that makes sense to build because DeFi is the only thing where people are willing to pay $12 a transaction. Well, now, transactions cost much less than $12 and rollups are getting better every day. So there's a lot of other things that you can build as well, right? Another really big and really important thing that's been happening over the last 5 years is the growth of zero-knowledge technology, right? So, I actually think that ZK snarks might be almost or even equally as important to the kind of privacy, openness, freedom, kind of alternative decentralized web tech movement as blockchains are. They're actually extremely powerful tools. They're extremely effective at giving us privacy, giving us scalability, and at the same time preserving security, which is a similar thing to what blockchains are trying to do, right? And in some ways, zero-knowledge proofs and blockchains are actually very good complements for each other, right? Because blockchains give you a lot of security, but in exchange, they sacrifice privacy and they sacrifice scalability. ZK snarks give you back privacy and they can give you back scalability. So build ZK apps, right? Basically, I think we've now gotten to the point where the tools for building a lot of ZK snark applications are just getting better and better every year. The protocols are getting better and better. Our ability to prove things, make proofs that you can actually prove on a computer in a reasonable amount of time is getting better and better. I remember in 2016 when the first version of Zcash launched, it took more than 1 minute to generate a signature. And today, all of these applications, they can generate proofs in sometimes 3 seconds, sometimes less than 1 second, depending on what technology you're using. So build zero-knowledge applications. Zero-knowledge applications are, I think, great for both privacy and scalability, right? So here, I have this link to a blog post. If you just go to vitalik.ca or vitalik.eth.link, either one, and you just scroll down the list. I wrote this post about 1 or 2 months ago, or just talk about some of the ways that you can use zero-knowledge proofs to actually build many kinds of applications that preserve privacy. And there's also a lot of applications of zero-knowledge proofs for scalability, right? So ZK rollups are a great example, and there's a bunch of teams building ZK rollups for the EVM, which I think is great. Privacy, I think, is still a bit less explored than scalability, actually. So just some interesting examples of privacy-preserving applications that might make sense to work on. Privacy-preserving, proof of humanity, or privacy-preserving proof of Pope. Basically, in Ethereum, we're starting to have more and more of these protocols where they're basically issuing some kind of attestation to at different specific addresses to say something about the person who controls that address, right? So the proof of humanity protocol, for example, it's a protocol where if you have to sign up and there's a DAO that verifies submissions, And if it accepts you, then it basically says like this address corresponds to some unique human, right? So it's not a bot. It's not like one person having 5,000 accounts. It's like one specific person that has one account. And if you have proof of humanity as an ingredient, then like you can start building a lot more powerful applications. You have like a lot more room to decide like what kinds of things you'll be building, right? So for example, you could build an airdrop where instead of like doing an airdrop just based on how many coins does someone have, how many transactions has someone sent, you can like say, I'm going to actually give like 15 coins to every single human, right? You could do like even NFT sales in a way that's more fair. You can do just create market mechanisms that try to be like more fair to individual people in some way. I'll talk about this later, but like there's also ways to make decentralized governance more fair if you try to like count humans instead of just counting coins. And privacy-preserving proof of POAP. So POAP, the proof of attendance protocol, is a protocol that like basically lets you say this address belongs to someone who actually participated at some event, right? So like I went to a conference in Argentina last year and I got a POAP for it, right? So there is a POAP that got given out to everyone who visited this conference in Argentina. And so you don't just know that this person is a human, but you actually know like what kind of communities they're part of and like what a different, how much have they participated in different kinds of communities, right? So you get more of this kind of information. Now, one of the big challenges with both of these protocols is privacy, right? Like you're basically revealing to anyone who can read the blockchain like who you are. And this is a big privacy risk. But at the same time, like I think there's a lot of really important things that we can gain from having these protocols. And so the challenge is like, how do we get the benefits without the costs, right? And zero-knowledge proofs could actually help a lot here, right? Like with zero-knowledge proofs, you could do something like prove that you are a unique human without revealing which human you are. You could prove that you have a POAP and that you attended like 5 events from a particular list without revealing like which events you specifically attended and without revealing like what your actual identity is. So a lot of interesting applications there. ZK negative reputation. So this is actually one of the sort of more advanced examples in this post that I wrote. Basically, the idea is to have a reputation system where you can make attestations that are not just positive but also negative. So you'll be able to prove things like, I participated in some decentralized social media platform and I made these posts that got upvoted, but I also did not get downvoted, or like I also did not get flagged for abuse. So you can do like all of these things, but at the same time also preserve people's privacy, right? Zero knowledge and NPC data marketplaces. This is interesting. Like I think a lot of people have been interested in this idea of like creating like more fair marketplaces for data, and there's applications of this in healthcare. There's applications of this in like a lot of different spaces, but the problem is that like it's not just a blockchain problem, right? Because you are trying to solve a trust problem, but the trust problem you're trying to solve is not just the kind of trust problem that a blockchain solves. You're also trying to solve a problem of privacy, right? A problem of like, I want to give a little thing about, a little piece of data about myself, but I don't want to give more data than that. I mean, ideally, like you want to even give data that contributes to, like, say, someone's machine learning model without actually like giving them the data directly, right? And if you want to do those kinds of things, then you need a different kind of cryptography called multi-party computation. So combine zero-knowledge proofs and multi-party computation, try to create better data marketplaces. I mean, this is a very advanced topic, but I think like this is the frontier, and there's a lot of exciting things that you can build here. So those are just a few examples of things that you can build with zero-knowledge stuff. I mean, I think building with zero-knowledge tech is still it is still advanced, but it's getting less and less advanced, and the tools are becoming more accessible with every year. So I still encourage people to really look at the tech and really consider, like even now, using it to build something. Soulbound tokens. So this is something that a couple of articles, one that I published myself and a more recent paper that I co-authored about a month ago. Like basically the idea is of using tokens that are non-transferable, right? So the basic idea here is that like you want to have tokens that represent, like say, that you actually are a member of some community, that you actually like learn, like prove that you know something, that you have some experience, you proved that you completed some challenge. Like, you want to like prove different things about yourself, but you want to prove that like actually you were the one who did those things, and you did not just like buy a token from someone else for $50. So basically making tokens that are like non-transferable. So Pope is actually a good example of this, right? Now, Pope tokens, like they are transferable in that like they are ERC 721s and you can send them to someone else if you want to. But like you can look on the blockchain and see, right? Like, has this Pope actually been transferred? And if you, like you can treat Popes that are still in their original address and Popes that have been transferred differently, right? And I'm basically expecting that these kinds of things are going to become used for a lot more different kinds of projects. And I think there are a lot of applications of this, right? So one that I mentioned is what we call soul drops. So like basically airdrops where in order to qualify for the airdrop, like you try to use some of this like on-chain information to actually figure out like who is in the community that you want to airdrop to, right? Like a lot of different projects they want to airdrop, but one of the challenges that they always face is like if you airdrop, then sometimes the airdrop just gets farmed by VCs, right? And VCs just create 100,000 accounts. Sometimes the airdrop, you just give it to random people, and someone creates like a really efficient app where everyone can just like go and dump their airdrop on Uniswap for $32, and everyone does that, and like you've just lost a lot of money. So what you want to do is like I think you want to distribute your token supply. You don't want to have this kind of plutocratic dystopia where like 7 people and VC funds control half the supply. But you also want to like actually give the supply out to people who are actually in your community, right? And so how do you tell like in a very verifiable kind of automatic way that it gives you like some of what we call credible neutrality, some ability to like actually prove to the public that you were fair in how you allocated it and that you're not like quietly giving lots of coins to yourself. Soulbound tokens might actually be a very powerful tool for doing this, right? So proof of humanity, you can like limit to individual people. You could even like, do interesting things with proof of humanity, like you could make a sort of fair ICO where if you want to, let's say, you could buy your first token for $1, but then buying your second token costs $2, buying your third token costs $3. And so the more tokens you buy, the higher the price of each one goes, right? So there's like different ways to try to create these mechanisms to sort of make them, less plutocratic and more fair. And things like proof of humanity could be a big part of it. Proof of attendance protocol can be good, and kind of similar ideas can be good for not just checking like who is a human, but also checking like who is actually a member of a particular community. And I think there's a lot of like good ideas here, but there is a lot of room still to actually build the infrastructure to make it really easy to do these kinds of things. So I think this is like another challenge for developers, like try to actually build more of these tools. Another interesting one is in this concept of like soulbound token gated community forums, right? So like imagine a private chat where basically things that are said in the chat, they don't get automatically broadcasted to everyone, but they, it isn't like just a couple of people who decide who gets in and who gets kicked out. Instead, like say you have a DAO, and that DAO issues tokens, and even like based on some measurement of whether or not you're in a particular community, that determines whether or not you can get in. So this, I mean, obviously, like, soulbound tokens and zero knowledge, I think, like, they're not separate, and there are really important synergies between them. And the reason why there are really important synergies, I think, is obvious, right? Because, like, there's a lot of really cool things that you can do just by having the ability to, like, know more things about the people behind the addresses that you're interacting with, and being able to say, like, this person is from this community, this person is not, this person is a core developer of this project, and this person has one Ethereum address, but actually he's mostly involved in some completely separate project, in, like, being able to distinguish those things. But the more you gain that ability, the more you're, like, breaking people's privacy, right? And zero knowledge is a great way to get some of that privacy back. So a lot of interesting ideas here. Better public goods funding. This is something that I think we've been talking about for the last 2 years, right? Basically that, like, blockchain communities need ways to fund public goods. Public goods are important for everyone, but they're especially important in blockchain communities because blockchain communities are internet communities. They depend heavily on open source software, public documentation that gets written on the internet, people making translations, just all kinds of work that's completely done in the open, and it's extremely valuable, but there is not a good way to charge for it, right? So better ways of, like, funding it and of, like, actually using community pools of funds to support those things, and even to support public goods that go beyond the blockchain space, is something that I think is, like, really important to care about, right? Now, how can we do this? I mean, so quadratic funding is interesting. So the Gitcoin team has been doing these experiments for the last 2 years, these quadratic funding rounds. And at the beginning, it was like this thing where you had, like, a $25,000 matching pool, and basically nobody cared about it. But I think over time, we've seen it, like, really grow and balloon, and now it's this big, $5 million thing, and you have just these really big matching pools that happen every couple of months, which I think is amazing. But there is still, like, opportunities to improve quadratic funding and to try to make the mechanism better, make it more safe against attacks, make it more privacy preserving, and all of these things. So this is one part of the public goods problem. Another way to look at the public goods problem is to look at it from the perspective of, like, credit assignment, right? So let's say that someone invents some amazing new zero-knowledge proof protocol. And this new zero-knowledge proof protocol is, like, makes it, let's say, 10 times cheaper to scale Ethereum rollups and to prove privacy, and it has some other magic amazing properties, right? Now, this is a public good. It's something that once you do it, it's in the open, it gets published, it benefits everyone. It doesn't even just benefit the Ethereum community. It benefits every crypto community. It goes, like, it could even benefit, like, lots of mainstream industrial applications, lots of government applications. It can make civil society more applications more secure. So it's a very public good. But one of the ways of, like, asking what the problem is to look at it from the problem of, like, well, who should get credit, right? And the answer almost never is one person, right? On the end, because like, it's easy to kind of tell who is, like, the last mile person who is responsible, right? Like, who is the guy who actually publishes the thing. But the person who publishes the thing, like, he did not invent, or she did not invent the idea in a cave, right? Like, they read existing work, synthesized existing work, talked to people, created one version of an idea, found someone who broke that version of an idea, fixed it, created a better version of the idea. There's always this collaborative process, and each of the ideas that they built on are also ideas that themselves, built on other ideas, and, like, there's this big tree of like, where the credit comes from. So one thing to think about is, like, people, I think, have for a long time been thinking about, like, the kind of the provenance problem, right? So this is, like, blockchain supply chain applications, like, people talked a lot about this in 2015 to 2017, right? Like basically, if you have like if you get some product, how do you tell like, you know, which country the different parts actually came from? How do you tell like what's trustworthy? Can you like put cryptographic links at every step in the supply chain, check them on chain and all of that? Like we could do that for public goods as well, right? We could try to like take the concept of citations and formalize it, make them cryptographic, make them more incentive compatible, have a kind of more, this kind of richer information about them, and just like have more information out there that could actually be used to properly compensate sort of everyone all along the chain of like actually producing some public good. NFTs for public goods. So like NFTs have always been this sort of challenging topic for me because on the one hand, like I think NFTs could be like a really amazing fundraising tool, and they could really help in like raising money for things that really need it and things that don't otherwise have business models, right? And they kind of already do. There's like a lot of artists that are around the world, and even people in places like, you know, Southeast Asia and Africa and Latin America that like really do get included and find a way of like making revenue through the NFT ecosystem. But on the other end, like NFTs can sometimes become this sort of ridiculous thing where people are trading $3 million monkeys, right? So like to me, like I guess my ideal world is like not to like I don't want to hate NFTs, and I also don't want to uncritically like NFTs, but so like I want to build better NFTs, right? And you know, it would be nice if we can like try to find a way to kind of get and make NFTs benefit public goods more, right? So you know, if you produce some public good and then like find a way to kind of sell some NFT for it, and the public good, like, you know, it could be some scientific result, it could be a work of art, it could be a blog post, it could be an idea. Basically, find ways to kind of create an NFT ecosystem that people want to participate in, and where at the same time, like you actually ensure that the people who get the funding aren't just kind of like very flashy and famous people at the end of the chain, but try to actually make sure that sort of the entire, you know, intellectual supply chain gets compensated well. So a lot of like, I think, interesting ideas to work on there. Better DAO governance. So I think, you know, DAOs are great and lots of people are doing DAOs, but at the same time, like DAOs have a lot of problems in governance. Like their governance is, in general, I think it's like either centralized or attackable. And like we see a lot of, sometimes some pretty scary attacks, right? Like I think very recently there was like a stable coin that got drained because someone bought up 51% of the supply of the tokens and made a governance operation to drain all the money, and did that in like a flash loan in a single transaction. And these kinds of things, like they happen because Coinbase-driven governance is like fundamentally broken, right? And I've written about this many times, so this is like, you know, another post where I talk about this. And there are ways that you can improve it on the margin, but I think ultimately you need to have governance that is not coin-driven. So this is also where things like soul-bound tokens, things like proof of humanity, things like proof of community membership come in. Like we need to have governance that depends on things other than just, you know, token ownership. And we need to like even get away from this idea that the purpose of a DAO is like fulfilling the will of the token holders, right? There are other stakeholders that matter too. So one of the directions to go is kind of non-coin driven governance platforms. And like, you know, I've talked about like ideas for how to do this in a couple of places, but there's also the problem of like actually building DAO governance tools that use those ideas, right? Like today everyone forks Compound because there's just lots of really good tools that are like make DAOs easy to operate if you assume that your DAO is a coin voting DAO and it forks Compound. There aren't good tools if you want to build a DAO some other way. If you want to build a DAO some other way, you have to do things yourself, right? And it's like, you know, in the last century, you know, we had like nobody gets fired for buying IBM, and here it's like nobody gets fired for forking Compound, right? But I think more people should get fired for forking Compound, and more people should get rewarded for like actually trying something different. So, you know, we have to actually build those tools and make it easier. Direction 2 is better communication platforms, right? Like governance isn't just about voting. Voting is the last step in governance. The steps that comes before is like, how do you actually create ideas, come to consensus on ideas, even like improve ideas over time and like get feedback even before the final vote happens, so that you actually can like better find an idea that makes, say, 90% of the community happy instead of just making 51% of the community happy. So better communication platforms. There definitely are projects that are trying to kind of do this decentralized governance communication thing. So, like Radical Exchange people, they talk a lot about Polis, right? It's this sort of platform for kind of finding ideas that different subcommunities can agree on. And Audrey Tong from Taiwan really likes it, and it gets used a lot there. So that's one good example. But you can look at that, but I think there's also room for like a lot more experiments here. But in general, I think like DAOs need better governance, DAOs need better communication. So lots of things to do here. So those are just a few ideas. There's plenty more ideas that you can try, but I think there's a lot of really interesting directions to work on. There's a lot of very exciting potential in this space that exists now that did not exist 2 years ago, but there's also still a lot of stuff that needs to be worked on. And I hope that people here can be a part of the solution.